Hi, this is the Evolved Educator podcast. Each episode, we talk about education and teaching. Our goal is for you to feel part of the community. We want to learn from you, and we hope you learn something from us too. So welcome. This is part 2 of a 3-part series on accountable talk. Today, we're focusing on accountable talk, how to implement it. I'm Chanmi.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm Michelle. In part 1 of the Accountable Talk series, we talked about why accountable talk is important.
So before we move on, let's quickly summarize. Accountable talk is important because reading and writing are based on speaking and listening, and teachers need to purposely plan opportunities for the students to be able to participate in accountable talk.
Right. And also academic discourse is important because it supports the development of student reasoning and their ability to verbalize their thinking.
That brings us to our segment today called Can You Tell Me More? So today we're going to talk about the procedures, how to implement accountable talk. And there is a ton of research on this topic. And something that I found very interesting is that even in classrooms where teachers do all the right things, they ask the sophisticated questions and provide prompts to guide student thinking, learning is inhibited without peer interactions. This is especially true for English learners, but really a lot of things I read, I was like, well, that could apply to anybody.
Did you know that in the early 2000s, Marzano, Pickering, and Pollock conducted an analysis of effective instructional strategies that identified cooperative learning with peers as one of the 9 research-based strategies with a large effect size.
It determined that small group interactions with other students offer lots of benefits, especially the English language learners. Things like repetition of keywords and phrases, functional, context-relevant speech, rich feedback, and reduced student anxiety.
So even though that research is focused on English learners, like I said, it makes sense that any student would benefit from repetition, feedback, and using academic speech.
I've met teachers and know them who, not all, but some feel intimidated by accountable talk because the classroom can get noisy and then there's a lot of movement to rearrange groups and it takes time. And the process of letting the students learn from each other, that takes time too.
You're right. I actually just had that conversation with a teacher today who she actually said, I know it's not a good idea, but this is why I like whole group instruction. Because of those exact barriers. But we know that it's worth the effort because the payoff is huge. If the teacher sets up the structure, most students appreciate the guidelines because most students love learning and they don't want the conversation to go off topic. But they need that structure. I just keep thinking about the conversation I had today, and the students really enjoy developing their own ideas, and they really love learning from each other.
Right. It builds that personal investment and ownership of their learning.
Right, absolutely. It's really an authentic way to learn. It's natural, it's very organic because students are thinking. And so the big question then becomes, how does a teacher, reluctant or not, sort of take that leap and start to set up that structure and the routines for accountable talk? How do you get it going?
Right. So actually, what I talked to this teacher about today is that there's some really simple things that any teacher can do. First is create a language of learning poster or table cards. And it's just a list of sentence starters, but it also identifies the language objective and the purpose. So it's very, very clear when and how to use each sentence starter.
Right. So if I were to set something up like this, I'd have 3 columns and I would start with a language objective, then what it is, and then my sentence starters. So, for example, my first one could be like to compare and contrast. That would be my language objective. And then what it is that it's showing how 2 things are alike and different, and you can explain that to the kids too. And then the sentence starters are the ones that support the language. And so here's something they both have in common, or these are different from each other because, and
or like the language objective. If it's to inquire, what it is asking questions. And so a sentence starter you might have would be, just your 5 W's. And, or what do you think?
Exactly.
Right.
It's not complicated. It's really simple, but it does take time to set up.
Well, right. And it requires giving the students practice. And the sentence starters are so great because I found, if you can create like an accountable talk poster in your classroom and introduce them slowly, with just something like a list of reminders with the sentence starters, the kids will use them a lot at first and they'll refer to them. But as time goes on, they refer to them less and less, but they continue to use them. And so you're just sort of setting up those routines and building the good habits of discussion. So like a poster I might have in my class would have maybe 2 columns, something like, remember to do this. And then here's what it sounds like in the other one. For example, like, remember to give a reason why your idea is a good one. What that sounds like is, oh, this reminds me of blah, 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 because blah, 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 blah. Or I believe this is true because things like that.
Exactly. I'm going to help that teacher set all that up. But because the students really do need these tools to help them articulate their thoughts. And then during guided instruction, the teacher can model how to use the tools. And, just refer to the posters and say, I'm doing that.
Right.
I'm going to ask you, I'm remembering to ask you a question when you don't understand a topic. So here's how it sounds. Can you tell me more?
Right.
Can you please say that again?
Right.
I need an example. I don't understand.
And we need to remember grouping is important. And it's because it's really important to make sure that when we arrange the students into groups, that we do it thoughtfully. So it's conducive for these conversations too.
That's very important too. And I don't know if you realize this, but there's like 15 different ways to arrange student groups. And that's a whole nother podcast by itself. But for right now, let's just say that it's worthwhile to take the time to make deliberate choices when you're placing students together.
So can we talk for a minute about one of the biggest barriers to implementing accountable talk? Chanmi mentioned this just a few moments ago, the noise. Nobody likes it. Really hard. It's hard to talk. It's hard to think when things are loud.
It's true. And that was the thing that was the issue earlier today. So here's the secret. You need to take the time to teach the students how to talk at a reasonable level. And it just takes practice like anything else. And with this particular class, a few things that I've done that I'm still working on with them to speak at a reasonable level is, first of all, I purposely model talking at a low and normal tone. That's hard for me because I'm a naturally loud talker. But I think actually now that I've started doing this, I think it makes the students listen even more attentively when I'm speaking at a lower tone. But, I say to them, listen to how I'm talking. This is how you should be talking. And then I continue with whatever the lesson is in the very low tone. We practice with singing. We start off at a normal tone, and then we get quieter and quieter and quieter, but never too quiet that we cannot hear ourselves sing. And then another thing that I've done is we practice with fun questions. So I had these students choose one food that they'd like to eat every day for a year. And what would that be and why? I wrote a tongue twister on the whiteboard. And first the students talk for 20 seconds and we monitor the volume. And then I double the time, and then I keep doubling the time until they can talk for a few minutes without getting too loud. And just like I said, it just takes practice and reminders.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing it every day, it's, it's going to take a little while, but they'll start to do it.
Yeah.
I know some people who use those noise meters. There's apps on the phone and for that. That's a really good thing. Just the visual to show the kids what's happening with sound.
Yes, I tried that too. Yes.
Yeah.
And then they have like those color, like the different levels of noise of like the different contexts. So if it's like you're doing a presentation versus you're with your partners or you're with group and things like that, that kind of tells them the context of noise too.
Yeah.
So the lesson here then today is it's important to take the time to set clear expectations and manage the outcomes by setting up structure and routines. And when you do that, you really can do anything in your classroom. In order for the students to realize the benefits of accountable talk, they need to be able to do it without direct supervision from the teacher.
Right. That takes practice, but
Yes,
true.
it does.
Practice and opportunity. That's the
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I think we should also point out that the structure and routines can be implemented at any time of the year.
Yes.
And it's okay to tell the students that you want to try something different. So, if this is just, the middle of the year and it's winter, or if it's, even in the spring and you're like, oh, I think I just want to finally jump into it, do it,
Right.
And tell the students that you want to pilot something, this technique that you want to work out. And then, once you start it, then you'll have the kinks worked out for the following year. So,
right. I've done that before. I've done at the end of the year.
Right. Yes. Just do it.
Well, and I feel like the kids are always up for it too. When you're like, you know what, I want to try this new thing. Do you guys want to try something new with me? And they'll be like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah.
They're really pretty willing to do it. So
yeah. They love it. And it doesn't matter if it's May, they'll do it. So that brings us to our segment, Strategies That Get the W. Each time we like to send you off with a little goodie, a strategy that you can use in your classroom. And today we have something called Explorers and Settlers. And I love this for a couple of reasons. First, it allows the teacher to include academic language regardless of the subject. So I know Explorers and Settlers is social studies, but a chemistry teacher could call it protons and electrons. A math teacher can call it sine and cosine. Whatever works for you, you can name it whatever you want. I love this also because it allows the teacher to purposefully choose who is in which group and manage who speaks first, which gives students who need more support a little bit more time to gather their thoughts. So how it works is you assign half the students to be, in this case, the explorers, and the other half to be settlers. The explorers seek out the settlers to discuss a question. And then you keep repeating this process. You can have different students discuss the same question, or you can have the students mix up and then discuss a whole new question, whatever you want. And then for a quick assessment, you can ask the students to record a 15-second video or write a short summary of their discussion, or just come back and debrief afterwards. And that's all we have for today. I hope you enjoyed.